Okay, it's time for dinner, and we're going to make a simple one-pot meal here that's going to include some seafood. So we got some white fish, and you can use any white fish that you enjoy. And if it's thin little fillets, you can actually add them to the Instapot frozen. It will work. The recipe says to have them thawed out, but I have used I have had them frozen, and it turns out just fine. Basically, we're going to be using some cod today. But flounder, mahi-mahi, anything that you like. You could even probably do this with salmon, although it wouldn't be very traditional. It would even be healthier with the extra omega-3s. So I'm going to put a little olive oil in here. We're going to start with sauteing our veggies. It's always that same triumvirate with the onions, the garlic, the olive oil. We're also going to be throwing in some celery and some potatoes. And I'm using little red potatoes that you don't have to peel at all. You just slice them thinly so that they'll cook. And we'll put in our celery. I'm going to wait till it starts to sizzle a bit. We'll start stirring. This one is, what's interesting about this dish to me is that it tastes really briny, like it comes from the sea. It has this very nice flavor that is really from the green olives. If you really hate olives, you can omit them, but it's not going to have that brininess. We're also adding some capers to it, and many people don't realize that capers are actually flower buds that have been pickled. And so they are used in Mediterranean cooking quite a bit. They impart sort of a salty, pickled flavor to foods. So we're not really adding salt because we've got these other areas that are providing that sort of saltiness, brininess to it. I'm going to get my onions cooking. I'm going to throw in my potatoes. And so this is what I mean by a one-pot meal. We've got our starch basically cooking with our fish and our veggies. So when it's done, you've got this nice quick stew. In the Instapot, there's only 7 minutes of cooking under pressure, and then you let it release a little bit, and you're pretty much ready to go. So it's very quick. Again, makes for meals that you can prepare in about a half an hour, as long as you've got things chopped up. And there isn't a lot of chopping either, really. Just cutting the potatoes, the onions, the celery. Let's throw the celery in. And don't forget the garlic. Again, we mince the garlic in advance so that it provides the allicin by mixing with oxygen. It has a little bit more of a therapeutic influence. And I'm just going to let this saute a bit. Then when it comes to tomatoes, you kind of have a choice. You can add some fresh tomatoes from the garden, or you can use the fire roasted tomatoes. And I'm going to do a little bit of both because I have a lot of garden tomatoes. If you don't, you can always use a can of fire roasted diced tomatoes. I really like those. And the ones that come with garlic are extra seasoned. So that's something I do use quite a bit. So things don't stick, I'm going to put my tomatoes, this is about a half a can of tomatoes, so I'm going to add about a comparable amount of fresh tomatoes in there. I like the fresh taste of tomatoes together. We're also going to throw in a bit of tomato paste, and tomato paste is, it gives kind of an umami flavor to our cooking, so a lot of times it's used to just give a more of a richer flavor. Let's see if I have a little spoon. I think I'm just gonna do about a tablespoon of that in there. And you can store the rest of it in the freezer if you wish. You can put it in little ice cube trays, or you can just put it in small containers, label it, and freeze it. And that way you'll have a tablespoon or two available whenever you need it. But I do use tomato paste as sort of something to give it a deeper flavor. And it's going to just cooked up a little bit more. We're going to throw in our olives. We've got about, it says a cup of stuffed olives. I'm going to use maybe half of the jar, because they are pretty salty, so you don't want to overdo it, but they're also very nice. And we're going to put in our capers. I do have some capers that I have taken out with a tablespoon of brine. I'm just going to put those in as well. And we have just suggested that you put a dash of Aleppo pepper or some kind of a little bit of red pepper flakes. These are the ones that you can get at Penzeys if you like them. But any kind of a red pepper is good, and works well. You can use Tabasco sauce or sriracha if you wanted to get a little kick that way too. I also have some fresh thyme, and if you do have some from your garden, go and put it in. I started realizing that instead of just taking all these little leaves off, you can sort of throw it in and then remove the little branches, and some of the leaves will just kind of pop off by themselves. So I'm just going to season it that way. Makes it a little bit easier. And we also need to put in some broth. I'm using the Better Than Bouillon clam base at half strength. I like this stuff because it lasts forever. So half strength means that I'm putting in about 3/4 of a teaspoon and a cup and a half of water. They would like you to use a full teaspoon, but it's too salty if you do that. So this is giving it flavor without quite so much sodium. And the last thing you're going to do is put the fish in and lay that on top. So I've got our fish. I'm just going to lay the fish on top. There we go. And a drizzle of olive oil on top of that before we seal it up. I'm just gonna doot. Okay. And seal it. I'm gonna turn it off, seal it, and we're going to cook it for about 7 minutes. So we push manual, go up to 7, and now we can just let it rest for a while. We can go do something else while this cooks. If I were serving this for a meal, I would definitely have a nice salad to go with it, and maybe some crusty bread as well, and fruit for dessert, because we want to follow that healthy Mediterranean pattern. So this is one of those things where we're going to add the greens at the end. As soon as we open up the pot, we can throw in some spinach. And I really like baby spinach as something that you always keep in your refrigerator, because at the last minute, it just wilts into everything. So this is something that you can just throw in. It's going to add some beautiful green color, but more than that, it's going to add lots of nutrition. So without any extra fuss. The nice thing about cooking fish in your Instapot, and for many people complain about the smell of cooking fish, you don't smell it, and that's kind of a neat thing. So if you're afraid of cooking fish because of the fishy smell that will permeate your house, you don't really have to worry about it if you're starting to use your Instapot. And this is naturally cooking it, almost poaching it, because it's in a liquid. So it's going to be very delicate. It's going to break up in pieces, which is why you can also do it frozen, because it will cook and it will get very tender. So as soon as the valve drops, it's kind of fun to watch. You can sort of feel it the steam is starting to come out of it. Also, just a caution, if you do use your Instapot, don't fill it too full. Believe it or not, it's sort of paradoxical, but the fuller you make it, the harder it is to get to pressure. So it takes a lot longer to go to pressure if there's more liquid in it than if you're just cooking a smaller amount of food. There we go. Oh wow, it's hot. It's hot. So I'm going to put that spinach in, which is something you want to do just to kind of wilt it in there. The fish is opaque, it's done, you can tell. Just going to let the hot liquid cook the spinach, which is one of the benefits again of spinach, is that you really just want it lightly steamed, just to kind of wilt, bright green. So you can tell it's pretty brothy. You've got your potatoes in there. And the spinach almost disappears. You could add more spinach if you wish. I'm just going to see if I can grab a little bit of this out. Remember, we did keep our thyme leaves in there, so I'm going to want to pull those out too. There's a big piece of fish, and you want to get some of the broth in there. So this really is kind of a stew, something you want to serve with a spoon. You can see the potatoes are in there, they're cooked. Got lots of fish, and but as I said, you will want to serve this with a spoon. And then the other thing I'd want to do is put a little bit more parsley on it, just for a nice little garnish. Remember, parsley, I'm going to throw some of this in here just to give it more flavor. And you can see it's a really nice looking stew. And I should have had a spoon here so I can taste everything, but I can tell that the fish is cooked. What's nice is that you can really taste the brininess of the sea. So I like that. So I hope you'll try these 3 dishes and recognize that you can do healthy cooking in your Instapot. And if you didn't do it on the Instapot, you can do the same thing on the stove. So enjoy.